Welcome to the Survivor to Thriver show with your happiness expert, Samia Bano. Do you feel stuck, silent, and stressed? Is something hurting your heart and soul? Are you burning yourself out? If so, you are in the right place because this is the podcast people from all over the world join in to learn exactly how to stop suffering and start living with inner peace and joy. Let's get started. Hey, for the last few episodes, I've been sharing with you how to be happy secrets. And I probably need to retitle these episodes into how to have a healthier relationship with your self-secrets, because that is really what we are focusing on in these episodes. But it's like, hey, you know what? A healthy relationship with yourself is so critical, so crucial to our ability to live a healthy, happy life, to live with inner peace and joy, that we really need to take this time to focus on this. And today we're going to continue with that focus on our relationship with ourselves, because it really is just that critical, just that important. So last episode, I actually shared with you a very specific technique that you can use to help you relate to yourself with more compassion and empathy and loving kindness. And that's really important, really, really, really important. So I hope you took some time and you practiced that you at least gave that a try, And hey, let me know how it went for you. If you find yourself struggling with it, remember, you can always reach out for help and support. And I'm one person you can reach out to for that help and support. And I'll be more than happy to do what I can and to be that supportive presence in your life. Okay, so if you need to reach me, just go to my website at www.academyofthriving.com. Click on the Contact Us page, and you'll see different options for how you can connect with me. Now, today, what I really want to focus on is this idea of self-acceptance and self-love as the results, the outcomes that you really want to achieve. So it's like, oh yeah, of course, I want you to be working on treating yourself with more empathy, compassion, and all that good stuff. But what's the end goal with that? It's self-acceptance and self-love. And I'm talking about unconditional self-love, unconditional self-acceptance. And I don't mean by unconditional that you turn a blind eye to whatever you perceive as your weaknesses, or if there's something that you have done in your life that you think is a mistake. I don't want you to be turning a blind eye to those things. That's not what unconditional self-love and self-acceptance are about. Unconditional self-love and self-acceptance are about accepting yourself and loving yourself just as you are, exactly as you are, with your strengths, but also your weaknesses, the good that is present within you, but also the not so good that is present within you. The beauty that is present within you, and even any ugliness that you think or perceive in yourself. You need to accept all of you, because all of these things, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly, all of these are aspects of you. They make you who you are. And you cannot just, leave part of you somewhere and get rid of it just like that in your life, right? It all stays with you all the time. So if you're like truly accepting yourself, truly loving yourself, then it requires that, it's with an awareness and understanding of all of you. And not just an awareness and understanding, but, the ability, again, like I said, we're talking about unconditional love, unconditional acceptance. I want to share with you, like the very first time when I really, I had an experience that really hit home for me, just how critical it is for us to have this kind of unconditional love and acceptance in our lives. It's absolutely critical, absolutely crucial. This, when I learned this lesson in my life, goes back to several years ago. Wow, I was around, can't remember exactly. I was still a teenager at that time. Probably, I would say like maybe 16, 17 years old at the most. And if you have been listening to this podcast, then you know that I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. I survived that abuse at the age of 8. And from that point onwards, my life was diverted to a quest for inner peace. And the first, being all of 8 years old, I didn't really know how to help myself deal with the trauma of what I had experienced. I didn't even really fully understand how it was impacting me, how it could impact me, in the future, and so on and so forth. So for a long time, for the first so many years, in the immediate aftermath of my surviving the trauma, I'd gone into like this sort of denial mode where I was just trying to get on with my life as if everything was fine, as if nothing had really happened, as if nothing had really changed. But of course, things had changed. I had changed. And what that trauma that I had survived was impacting my life in all kinds of really deep, fundamental ways. And the denial, the trying to run away from the memories of what happened, it only worked for so long. It's just not a good long-term strategy. It's just not a sustainable strategy. You can't run away from the reality of your life and your experiences and how you're feeling. So I got to this point where I was forced to face up to how I was feeling, right? And on this particular day, there was actually something that happened, and I won't get into the details of what happened. There's something happened that triggered a really strong emotional response, to the point where I started to cry, and I was crying uncontrollably. I couldn't stop crying. And it was I mean, my first and immediate reaction in that moment was, I need my mom. I need my mom. And I couldn't even stop myself in that moment from running straight to my mom and just like, and of course my mom, being my mom, she like sees me running to her and I'm like crying and all that. So, she gives me envelops me in this hug. And by the way, my mom gives the best hugs ever. So there I am, and for a while, she just let me be and just like comforting me and stuff. But then she started asking me questions about, why am I crying? What's wrong? And I couldn't tell her what was wrong and why I was crying, because up to that point, I had not told anyone about what had happened. Right? And I couldn't even imagine at that point in time ever telling my family about what had happened. It was in fact one of the deepest fears that I'd been living with up to that point. What happens if my family finds out? What would happen if my family finds out? And I didn't think anything good would happen if my family found out about the abuse that I had experienced. So for me, like, I could not tell my mother about why I was crying in that moment. So I did the next best thing. Not even the next best thing, the best thing that I could figure out in that moment once my mom started questioning me about what was happening. And again, remember, she was just coming from this place of loving concern. But anyway, so I did the best thing that I could figure out in that moment, and that was to run away. So I ran away just from my mom, and luckily at that point in time, I was living in our family home. It was like this huge home, 3 stories. And so whenever I needed to be alone or wanted to be alone, like I would run up to the 3rd floor, which, and lock myself in a room over there. And so this is exactly what I did this time. And this room had, all the supplies, like, because it was something that I did pretty frequently, being in that room, locking myself in, not because I was crying every time, but because, I was a bit of a loner. I'd become a loner. I'd become very introverted. So I spent a lot of time on my own. And the thing wasn't just that I was introverted and that I was, spending all this time alone. Like, of course, at one level, I was choosing to do that, but it wasn't necessarily a choice that was coming from an empowered place. I actually felt really lonely. I actually felt really isolated. It was actually, and that feeling of loneliness and isolation was one of the things that was the greatest points of pain and suffering for me. But I didn't know how to cure it. And the thing was, because of exactly the kind of thing that happened in this particular instance, where, things would come up and then people would start asking me questions about why I was behaving this way or that way or thinking this or saying that. And I could not be open with them about it. And it was just like too much, it just created too much drama to deal with all that questioning. So it was like, my best response at that time in my life was to just run away from things, just avoid them, right? So that's why I started to isolate myself. It's like, okay, I'm just going to stay on my own, do my own thing. So then there's no reason for people to question me, and then they won't get worried and all that kind of stuff. So here I am, yet another time, when, oh God, it's like this loneliness, this sense of isolation, it's like eating me up from the inside. And so I'm in this room, and it's all set up for me, in terms of it has everything that I need to spend hours and hours there and doing things that I love to do, which are basically two things. One, reading books, and two, writing in my journal. So in this case, I was like in just such a state of like crying, and I couldn't stop. There was like, I didn't even think I could focus on reading. So instead I picked up my journal and I started writing. And as I start to write, like my blame and judgment voice is the most dominant voice. And it's like, oh, Samia, why are you crying? You're so stupid. Stop crying. There's no reason for you to be crying. You're acting like such a big baby. And look, you made mom worried, and what are we going to tell her, or how are we going to explain to her what happened and why you were crying, and just like, all this like blaming and judging and shaming and guilt trips. And of course it didn't make me feel better. So for a while, it was like, oh, I felt even worse. But I kept writing. Eventually I calmed down, and I still kept writing. And now this other voice, this other part of me, became more dominant. This other part that's the more rational and the sort of the philosopher in me. I do have a rather philosophical heart. And so by the time that, like my philosopher self takes over, and, it becomes like really reflective. It's like, okay, what can we learn from this? What's going on over here? And so we start to think about and analyze, like, what's really going on? It's like, why? And it just came down to this realization that, my God, like, I feel so alone. I feel so isolated. And it's like, I can't bear this anymore. This is getting too much. And here's the reason why I'm feeling so alone and feeling so isolated, even though I'm surrounded by a loving family, including my mom. Like, not only is my mom, like, when I think of people that I love the most in the world, I think of my mom. Pretty much the first person who comes in my head. And when I think of who loves me the most, my mom's again a person who one of the first people who pops up in my head, right? So I have my mom, and it was not just my mom. I have lots of people in my life, even right in that moment, there were lots of people in my life, like my brother, my sister, my grandparents, aunts and uncles, my dad. And I knew without, it's like there's no doubt in my mind that all of these people love me. And they show me that they love me in all kinds of ways every day. And yet it wasn't enough. I still felt alone, and I still felt isolated. And up until that point in time, I did not have clarity. I did not realize why. Like, up until that point in time, I used to think, Samia, you're just being stupid. you're just, like, it doesn't make any sense. You're not alone. There's no reason why you should feel alone. Just stop it. You're just being stupid. That's how you used to talk to myself. But this day, I realized and I recognized why I still felt so alone. Why it wasn't enough. All the love and care that I was showered with every day. Why it wasn't enough. It was because there was a part of me that I felt I had to keep hidden. That I could not share with these people who loved me and that I loved in my life. And I had been living with this fear that if they found out about what had happened to me, about the abuse that I had experienced and how I had dealt with the situation, and because I blamed myself a lot, I judged myself a lot, I felt a lot of shame and guilt around that whole experience of being a survivor of child sexual abuse. And my mind said to me that if my family finds out, nothing good can happen from their finding out. It was afraid that if my family found out, that they would also blame me, that they would also judge me, that they would also feel that kind of shame and guilt that I felt when I thought about what had happened. You see? So there was this part of me that my loved ones did not know. And that they could never know unless I opened up to them. And I didn't believe that I could open up to them. Like, I was just too scared. So it was not a realistic possibility for me at that time to open up. So now I'm in this catch-22, where on the one hand, I realized that if they don't know all of me, which includes this deep, dark part of me, then they can't love all of me. And what I realized in that instant is that if they don't love all of me, then their love is never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough. As long as they're only loving a part of me, that love is never going to be enough. But the only way they can know all of me is if I share all of me. If I share this deep, dark part of me. And I felt like I couldn't do that. And so now I'm like doomed. I'm doomed forever to suffer with this loneliness. To suffer with this isolation. To be surrounded by so many people. Even loving, caring people, people that I love and care about, and yet never feel fully satisfied. Never have my need to be fully loved and cared for met, because there's this part of me that I cannot reveal to them, and therefore they cannot know, and therefore they cannot love me and accept me, all of me as I am. And in that moment, you see, it's like I recognize that how crucial and critical and absolutely necessary it is for us to experience unconditional love and unconditional acceptance. Without it, our need to be loved is just not met. It's just not met because we cannot separate out these different parts of us. I wish we could. right? I mean, that was my thinking at that time. And I had done my darnest, tried my very best to ignore and push away and do away with this part of me that gave me so much pain, that I hated. But I could not separate that part of me from the rest of me. And neither can you. Right? So that's why the unconditional love, unconditional acceptance is not about turning a blind eye to your dark side. It's about accepting and loving yourself with a full awareness of that dark side. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up right here for today. I just want you to really think about this concept, this idea of unconditional love and unconditional acceptance, and where you may be missing that in your life when it comes to your relationship with yourself. If you're struggling to have a healthy relationship with yourself, or maybe this is also a problem that's cropping up in your relationships with other people. So identify those areas, those aspects of yourself, those parts of your life where you need to achieve greater self-love, greater self-acceptance. And then next episode, and so on and so forth, we'll pick up from here and reflect more on what you can do to help yourself if you are struggling with this issue. Okay? All right. So in the meanwhile, until we connect next time, I want to, give you a really quick reminder that if you haven't already, please go to iTunes and leave this show, the Survivor to Thriver show, a 5-star rating so that other people can also find this show much more easily. And it's also a great way for you to show me your love and appreciation, and I really do appreciate it. So please go ahead and do that. And other than that, I just wish you lots of peace and joy.